Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Exercise is Bullshit, which, for those of you new to our podcast, bullshit stands for bodybuilding utilizing logical lifting and scientific heuristics to inform training. I am joined today by Dr. Giulia Coletta out of the University of British Columbia. She's a colleague of Dr. James McKendry, who has been on the show. And if you want to say any more about that, Julie, that's your personal business. I can let you say anything more about that relationship. But so happy to have you here today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, kind of how you got into exercise science.
Yeah, thanks so much, Logan. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. So I am a postdoc right now at the University of British Columbia, and my research experiences started back at McMaster University. During my undergraduate degree, I did a thesis, and it was in the nutrition and healthy aging with a focus on sarcopenia, and that kind of galvanized the pursuit of research. I started to enjoy it and found my way into Dr. Stu Phillips' lab for my master's and stuck around with him for my PhD. And most of the work that I've done, it has been around sarcopenia and aging with a focus on community-based exercise for older adults. So if you talk to Stu, he likes to say that I'm the peninsula of the lab group because a lot of my work is non-invasive and not like his traditional training of, protein metabolism and exercise physiology. I've definitely taken that non-invasive approach and looked at we know exercise is good. So trying to find a way to get people to actually do it and engage with using easily accessible equipment and reducing barriers. And that kind of interest led me to my postdoc, where I'm working with a team called the Active Aging Research Team, and they do implementation science. And the supervisors, Dr. Heather McKay and Dr. Joni Sims-Gold. And a lot of the work that we're doing here is implementation science, so trying to get older adults to do exercise and physical activity, and they have a health behavior change program. So they focus on health promotion and getting older adults to understand the benefits of exercise and to improve their ability to participate in it.
I think seeing how passionate you are about what you do is important, right? And this is such an important area of research. And as kind of an exercise science nerd, like it's easy to get caught into the protein metabolism side. Which supplement can I take that's going to give me the biggest biceps? How many sets do I need to do exactly to make sure that I'm going to be as jacked as possible? But the reality is, the people that are going to the gym, they care about this stuff, but it's not really going to change the fact that they're going to the gym. How do we bring it down to the floor for people who need it the most, which is, I would argue, like elderly populations who are struggling with sarcopenia, struggling with isolation, struggling with activities of daily living. Like these are the populations that are probably the most in need of these interventions. So to actually figure out what are the interventions that we can utilize that are actually going to, we know it all works, right? We've kind of come to that conclusion, or at least that's sort of my conclusion with, 10-ish years now in the exercise science field is like, it all kind of works. It's just what's your preference and what are you actually willing to do? And when the barrier to entry can be as low as possible, I think the coherence is going to be a lot higher. So, with this research focus, what are you currently working on from a research perspective, and how did you kind of find yourself in this peninsula, as you called it, instead of like the applicational side of studying protein metabolism? Where did you kind of find that shift where you turned into focusing on older individuals and sarcopenia? And then one more add-on, sorry, can you explain as well what sarcopenia is for some of our listeners who may not be familiar?
Definitely. So sarcopenia is the age-related disease. It's an age-related disease, and it's the loss of muscle mass, strength, and function with aging. And it's a naturally occurring process as we get older. And a way that we can mitigate it or reduce the risk of it is through exercising and particularly strength training. So we can maintain our muscles or have a big baseline, because this kind of happens around your fourth decade of life. You start to see this trajectory downwards. So through strength training, if we can maintain our muscles, we can keep our strength and our function into our older years. It'll help to reduce secondary consequences of aging, like falls, frailty, hospitalization. And so kind of that transition for me was, I think I was more interested in we are told so often exercise is good and we know it's good, but so few people engage with it. And it was trying to really focus on why folks aren't engaging in it. It's like, we know it's good. What are those barriers to participating in resistance training, specifically for older adults? And what are the ways that, is it through knowledge? Is it through conversations? Is it better programming? Is it more easily accessible equipment? And some of the stuff that we found too was that older adults are worried about injuries, and they associate commonly resistance training with injury. If you're lifting heavy things, that's going to hurt. Or if they already have pain, this is likely going to make that pain worse. So it's just trying to understand the barriers first, so that we can start to tackle them and get older adults to engage in the programming. And I think that, of course, everyone needs to do strength training, but I think with the older population specifically, a lot of the focus for them too has been aerobic training in the past. And that's always a lower barrier way to get into exercise. So you'll find lots of older adults will walk, which is great. We need at least 8,000 steps a day, but many don't participate in strength training. But when you ask them and talk to them about their goals, a lot of the time it is they want to be able to, climb the stairs, be independent, do those activities, daily living, like you mentioned. And so when they mention those goals, but then say that they want to walk more, sometimes that doesn't align. And so it's trying to just teach them about strength training, teach them about the importance of it, but also have them engage in a manner that they can do it consistently. So I think when we talk about all these all of the sports science kind of exercise things, we're looking at optimizing it. You want the best way to train to get to be in that top 1%. But with older adults, we're just looking for consistency, really. It's like taking someone who's doing nothing and getting them to do something is going to be where you see those biggest benefits. And then them doing that consistently is going to have the biggest impact, in my opinion, on their day-to-day life and their independence, than trying to really hammer home where that the optimized program is for an older individual, because I think they just need to do a little bit more.
Yeah, I always frame that up very similarly. I always talk about optimal versus sufficient, right? So you said consistency, which is obviously important in any kind of program, but for me, it's, are you trying to optimize? Do you want to be 5% body fat and, Mr. Universe? Or do you just want to be able to, especially for older adults, I think it's like getting a cold, right? Like, you never worry about your nose being stuffed up until it's stuffed up. And you never really worry about not being able to, pardon my French, wipe your own ass until you can't wipe your own ass
Yeah,
anymore, right? So it's like
exactly.
having that ability that you really take for granted. We just want them to be sufficient in all their, adequate and all their, and probably above adequate, above average. But most people who are being completely sedentary are really hitting those last couple decades hard. And I think the mission that you kind of have to figure out ways to incorporate this into more older individuals' lives is a great mission, because we're living longer. Like, even though people are getting unhealthier and fatter, they're still living for a lot longer. And especially with the introduction of AI and all the medical technologies that are coming over the next decade, who knows when we're going to have the first 120-year-old person, but it's coming fast, right? And we're going to be curing cancer and curing disease, and it's like we're just going to be overrun with old decrepit people, or it's going to be like Wall-E, if you've ever seen that movie, where everybody's just sitting around
Love
in
that
chairs,
movie.
drinking milkshakes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we keep people active in those later years and make them functional? And I think that's such a great mission. So before we start kind of diving a little bit more into the research, because I really want to talk about some of your online studies where you were looking at just kind of incorporating what would people potentially want, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the intervention study as well. But one of the things I like to do on this podcast is, especially when I'm talking to researchers or clinicians or practitioners, people that are actually in the trenches, is, if you're involved in the research, if you're actually considering yourself an exercise scientist, your opinions, your views, they're going to change and evolve over the years. So what is something you can think of in the last 3 to 5 years that maybe you were pretty adamant about before, but due to mounting evidence to the contrary, you've kind of had to shift your perspective?
Well, that's a good question. I think before I was more adamant on like, we have to get people to do like, a certain program, or they have to be doing like exercise in a certain way, particularly when it came to strength training and all that. But I think I've come to the realization that it doesn't matter, kind of like what we were talking about, the optimization. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It's just more important of like that they're doing something, and that consistency is good. And I think it's necessary to then start to build into it. Because once you have someone who's doing a program and they're doing it consistently, they can then, start to optimize it once they start to get more comfortable. And I think that was some of the stuff that I was seeing too, particularly with my programs, is, that first couple of weeks, everything is new. Everything's a new movement. Like we like squatting, all that. It's like learning that so you can't really focus on progressing that quickly through that, because you need them to have the foundation of what they're doing before you can start to, get them to lift maybe a little bit heavier. And such an important piece of it that I think we sometimes fail potentially to realize as even younger people is there's a whole side of it that's like self-efficacy and confidence with doing the exercise program. And that is it can be difficult for any age group, but it's difficult when you've never done this. And I find too, even with women who are older that are strength training, like that's something that they've never been told to do, taught to do. And it's so new that I think that just getting people into the program, just getting them showing up is such a huge step. And I think that I would now probably move away from saying like, you have to, when you come in, you have to do X, Y, Z, to just come in and like, let's get started.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such an important point too, like generational differences, because we're kind of seeing the aging population is sort of the Ken Cooper aerobics generation that's really starting to, they ran or they were jogging for 20 years, and now maybe their knees and hips are even more screwed up because nobody really knew,
Yeah.
what the right shoes should look like. And they just always heard that weights are going to make you bulky and you're going to get injured.
Exactly.
And then now maybe they're on TikTok and they see videos of somebody dropping a barbell on their head that their kid sent to them or something like that. So overcoming all of those obstacles, I'm sure, is super important. And if you can, again, keep the bar to entry really low, and then once they start to feel the difference, see like, oh my God, I can actually push myself up out of my wheelchair. I can walk around a little further than I was before. I can start being a little more independent. All right, what do you got next? Like, what can we do? Now I trust you. Now there's that level and
Yeah.
foundation of, okay, I was wrong about this. Show me more. I want to learn more. So I think that's awesome. So
Yeah.
the first study that I found on your research date that I'm interested in was kind of the initial trial where you were looking at what older individuals would like potentially from an online program. So there was no intervention as far as I could tell. It was simply just kind of a research-based study, like asking a questionnaire to individuals. Am I wrong on that, or were there multiple different studies?
There was two different studies.
Okay,
There was the pilot intervention where we did have an exercise training program for 8 weeks, and folks participated online 3 times a week. And then the side kind of project with that was that probably qualitative paper you saw,
gotcha. So
where
that's
we
the
were
one I
looking at
wanted to
their
discuss first because I do want to
yeah.
talk about both. So just from the qualitative perspective, tell me a little bit about what the project was and what you were kind of hoping to accomplish, and then what did you sort of find in the study? What kind of questions were you asking? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so we were mostly interested in the feasibility and acceptability of doing an online exercise program with older adults. And granted, this all came out because of COVID. I was probably 6 months into my master's, had a whole different plan for my degree, and then COVID hit. So we kind of moved with the times and went online to still try to get, engage older adults in exercise during this period where people were isolated. And so we were mostly focused on that feasibility and satisfaction and the acceptability of the program. But we were finding a few different themes coming out from the study around perceptions of safety, particularly with the trainers. And I think that's something, again, that gets overlooked is an important aspect of exercising for older adults is social connectivity. And that's why sometimes aerobic is a little bit more enticing for older individuals, because you can have those group-based classes, you can have
Zumba
walking,
classes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
you
that
can,
makes sense.
yeah, there's a little bit more social connection there. And when we think about strength training, it can be isolating, because if you think about it, traditionally you're going in, you're like going to the barbell, you're lifting weights. But that's why we focused on that group base, even though it was online, because there would be a little bit more social connection there. And that was coming through in the way that folks were talking about the program. They had interactions with the instructors, so the registered kinesiologists and the physiotherapists. They got to chat with the research team and they talked to each other. So it was a space that they had 3 times a week where they could talk to people and connect, and they could, talk about the program and what they were doing. And so social connectivity was huge. And that also came through with, again, that safety, or that perception of safety with instructors. And I think that that's really important too. When you've got someone who's a novice trainer and they're coming in, the ability to build a rapport with them and make them feel safe is huge. And we were really fortunate to work with the staff at the Physical Activity Center of Excellence, which is PACE at McMaster. It's a community-based gym, and they exclusively work with older individuals, and they have tons of experience, and they're really good at modifying exercise programs for older adults to make sure that they're safe for them to do. And I think that really helped people feel comfortable in engaging in the exercise, even when they were at home and technically alone, that they were doing something that like we could modify, like, using a chair, or instead of doing like jumping jacks, they were doing like modified jumping jacks. So all of those things, because we were taking into consideration, knee pain, not being able to do certain things. And I think that really leads to, we had really great feasibility or attendance and acceptability with the program. I think it was 92% attendance and 91% satisfaction with the program during like an online thing. That's pretty great when you don't get to see people regularly.
Yeah, so you've kind of transitioned naturally into talking about that other study where you're actually implementing this, which is totally fine because we're going to talk about that next. What did the kind of structure, you mentioned a little bit about some of the movements, some of the things that were in there. How was it actually structured for everyone? And I know you had a intervention group and then a control group that I assume was still going to have the opportunity later, but you just wanted to do that. Yeah. So typically for our listeners who aren't aware, like when there's a intervention that's a non-placebo controlled study, especially in like a resistance exercise intervention where there's going to be benefits basically, and you don't want to sort of screw over the other participants in the study that
Yeah.
have that intervention. You run two moving arms at the same time. So one is getting the intervention, the other one is not at the same time that the intervention is going, but then they still have the ability to get that intervention later on. You just kind of want to see how they're doing so you can compare the two together for the sake of the study. So you had that trial going. How many participants? What did the actual intervention look like? I know you mentioned working with PACE, but were these one-on-one classes with multiple people in the same group on Zoom, or was it a group class where everybody kind of came to the PACE Center? Talk to me a little bit more about the structure.
Yeah, so we had about 32 participants run through the program, and at a singular time, we had about 8 individuals who were on the online class, and that was just from a safety perspective. So we had the instructor and then a moderator, which was myself, just to watch the individuals, and they were all training from home. So they were in their houses, they had their whole setup, and they would log on. And so for that one specifically, because it was so early on in the pandemic, we were just focused on really understanding the best approach to running an online class. So it was less focused on the actual exercises and the progressions and all that. So we did a warm up, they did body weight strength training. They did some aerobic and balance. So those were the primary, like a blended program. And with the strength training, they
chair based, or was it like moving up and down from their seated position, or was it kind of modified based on the limitations that they might have had?
Yeah, it was modified based on the limitations, but I found most people ended up, so they started seated and then they would end up standing up by the end. And so that was part of the progressions. And we did they used water bottles, soup cans, whatever they could find to also to add a little bit of resistance towards the end of the program. And yeah, so it was a blended class, and it was for 8 weeks, and they did it 3 times a week.
Was it 30 minutes, 60 minutes? How long were the actual workouts?
The workout ended up being about 45 minutes, and we had a little bit of time for a warm-up, cool down, and some chatting naturally.
Got it. Yeah, no, the old people at the chat. That's great.
Yeah.
So, what were some of the outcomes and takeaways? I noticed there were five that were kind of the main focuses. If you don't have them off the top of your head, I can remind you. But if you do kind of remember, what were some of the big perceived benefits, the things that people really liked about the program?
You're asking me to think back now.
Not trying to put you on the spot. I can tell you. So I thought these were all made total sense. So there was the feasibility of the online work. Obviously, they didn't have to go
Yeah.
anywhere, which is a huge contributing factor to somebody actually being consistent, like you mentioned. The perceived health benefits. So obviously, they felt like they were doing something, that it was making a
Yeah.
difference. The perceived safety. I think the big thing that you did there, which we also do at our company, is you had registered kinesiologists and exercise physiologists that were overseeing these exercise routines, which you probably know, and I definitely know that having a training certification doesn't really mean anything in our industry. So finding some kind of baseline accreditation that you can like hold as at least the standard for the clients that you're training is really important, because you can say I have all these different certifications, but they're all online, 2-hour classes and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think, feeling like you're working with a professional is definitely super important. Obviously, the social connectivity, having that little chat afterwards, connecting with yourself and then the trainer, and then aging gracefully, which I thought was great. Like being able to continue to
Yeah.
do the things that they want to do, not feel like they're a burden on the system or on their family or anything else. So, were there any other major takeaways that you had from this study?
I think the one or the two major takeaways again was that working with the exercise professionals, like we know that it's good, but the like kind of like you said, you don't have to have all of the degrees and certifications. It's just the ability to connect with someone and the ability to like build their confidence and make them feel safe when training. That was a really big takeaway, as well as the feasibility with doing online, because it did transition into the next study that, or the last study I ran in my PhD, which will hopefully be coming out soon and eventually. But we did kind of this fated contact model where, again, we leveraged the findings from that first study and we used the exercise, the registered kinesiologists as the instructors. And we did the fated contact where they came in for the first 6 weeks in person to do resistance training using resistance bands. And then they transitioned to a hybrid model, so one day in person and one day online, and then they went fully online. So it kind of allowed us to see that, it's feasible to do this online. People like it, they'll engage, the adherence is good. And if we maintain that group-based structure and the registered kinesiologist, we assumed that it would still have the same kind of feasibility and acceptability, and we could get folks to train in a way that they don't have to sign up for a gym membership, they don't have to come in all the time. There is a little bit of flexibility, and it hopefully would build up that confidence for them to do it independently eventually.
Yeah, that's great. And even just having somebody that you can check in with from time to time, like if you are doing your own thing, but you can, once every week or once every 2 weeks, just check in with your kinesiologist. Yeah, I think that's awesome. So I really enjoyed this study because this is exactly the business model that myself and the rest of my team run. So we do all virtual one-on-one training. We all used to work in person. Obviously, COVID happened, transitioned into virtual training, and then I was still in person for a long time. And then the last like 2 years, I've transitioned out, and now the entirety of my business is online as well. And I don't specifically, and we don't as a company specifically target like older individuals, like you would say in the study, that 65 to 80 range. But I probably have four or
Yeah.
five clients that are in that range. And I would say the majority of our clients
Okay.
are over 50. And just to be able to see, and we'd use pretty drastic strength training interventions. So we're only 30 minutes, but it's full body strength training. So most of our
Okay.
clients are using free weights, or they go to an actual like big box gym and they train there, so they're using machines. So it's not just like little bands, although we do use bands. And just to be able to see the dramatic increase in their quality of life for those people, some that I've been working with since COVID now, so almost
Yeah.
5 years, has been pretty awesome to see. I've just got a question for you, because I actually was fortunate enough to meet some colleagues through LinkedIn, and then I actually met them when I went overseas. Are you familiar with Burns Gym? It's based out of Scotland. Have you ever heard of
No.
it? I'm gonna
No,
have
I
to send
haven't.
you their information afterwards. So as I was reading your study, this was all I could think about. So it's two brothers, Tony and Joe, and they work with nursing homes all over the UK, and they're actually
Okay.
spreading to the US. And I know they've done some independent research with other universities in the UK. But just based on the kind of conversation we're having and your passion in that, I think teaming you guys up together because they have a huge
Okay.
network that they work with. I mean, they train nursing homes multiples at a time. So they might have 200 people in a call where it's like, 30 people in one nursing home, 50 in another nursing home, and they're all doing their Zoom and stuff together.
That's
So I think,
awesome.
yeah, I think, even if you can't do a study or something together, just kind of chatting about interventions they've used and things like that would
Yeah.
be really helpful. So I put a note. I'm going to set you up with them after this. Okay, let's just transition a little bit more into the importance of exercise. So obviously we've talked about these interventions, what they look like. Why is structured exercise so important specifically for older individuals?
Yeah, and that comes down back to sarcopenia. So, as you're aging, you're at greater risk for um, falls and frailty. And I think frailty is something we use because people are familiar with it and other chronic conditions. And this can happen because as we start to age, we lose muscle mass, um, and exercise is so critical for mitigating so many of these things. If you can build muscle, if you can maintain strength, then you can maintain independence, and it can reduce your risk of cancers. It can reduce your risk of diabetes and improve your quality of life, and it reduces risk of hospitalization and kind of all those things that you hear about aging and the things that people worry about. Exercise can mitigate it because you're building just a stronger self to be able to move through the world with a little bit of ease.
Yeah, I love that. Can you tell me just a little bit more for our listeners who are maybe unfamiliar with exercise and how it can reverse things like sarcopenia and aid in things like balance and activities of daily living? What is sort of and I know this is going more into the application side, like the protein metabolism side, but maybe just like a brief overview of how resistance training is such a potent stimulus for creating new muscle and what that could potentially look like over the course of, say, a 6 month routine, 12 months, over 5 years, as you kind of multiply it out and some of the ways that that can add to your life.
Yeah, so I think if I'm understanding the question, you're just by when you resistance train, you're specifically targeting your muscles. So when you're aerobically training, let's say as an example, that would help with your cardiovascular fitness. So, things would get like it helps with your lungs and things get a little bit easier that way. But when you're resistance training, you're building muscle specifically. And so if you're focused, let's say, on doing some squats, even if it's body weight to start, just a little bit of extra resistance can help to make those muscles bigger, and then you can handle more load as you move through. And then if you can, the key is to do progressive resistance training. So if you start with, let's say, body weight, and then you're able to work up to, maybe adding 5 pounds, 10 pounds, you're creating, I'm trying to do this simply, like you're giving yourself the opportunity to be able to kind of carry yourself through and do your activities of daily living. So like I'm thinking for older adults, if your goal is, to get out of the chair with ease or get up off the toilet and things like that, when you're doing a squat, you're kind of, if you will, you're mimicking those like functional movements with resistance training, and you're building muscle to do that exercise, and that builds strength, and all those things will, help protect your body as you get older, in a very like, yeah, if I'm trying to think of like a simple, like not
Yeah,
easy
no, that
way
was a
to
great kind
digest
of
that, it's
broad overview. I think that's great. The way I always like to think about it, and I think how it was explained to me early on, is like something as simple as walking up the stairs, right? If you look at your body as sort of it's sectioned off with units of energy, right? When you are walking up the stairs and you've been strength training, it might only take 5 units of energy. Say you only have 100 units of energy for the entire day. It takes 5 units of energy. As you get weaker and you get more frail, you have to dip deeper into those energy reserves. So you start to lose a little bit of muscle mass. You're in your 50s, you haven't been doing anything. Now that same staircase takes 20 units of energy. By the time you're 60, it's taking 40 units of energy. By the time you're 70, 80, it's taking 70 units of energy, and you just feel completely wiped out just walking up that one staircase. Now, with resistance training, you can sort of reverse that because you increase your energy reserves, your ability to generate force, you actually have to use less energy to do the same activity. So I don't know if that was more confusing or less confusing, but that was kind of explained to me early on. So we've already
Yeah, I
talked
like the
about
idea of the energy reserve.
yeah, we've already talked about some of the main barriers for entry to exercise, specifically in older populations. I mean, time is always going to be one. Maybe not for old people who are retired. Lack of understanding, I think, is a great one, and kind of fear of the unknown, fear of injury. One that I think a lot of people probably take for granted, especially with community dwelling older individuals, is just the ability to travel, right? To get to a
Yeah.
physical gym. So that's where virtual training, I think, is such a great tool to combat this because they can train anywhere, they can get some connection. Hopefully, as they get more resilience and independence, they can then start going to the community center and seeing other people. So I think it's just a great way to really build up confidence for people. So, as far as recommendations go, we talked a lot about you can use anything, but where should people start if they think maybe they want to do a resistance training routine, but they have no idea? Do you have any tools, resources that people can find, or just some general recommendations for like just get a set of bands and do X, Y, and Z exercises for a few weeks? I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, I think that if people, it depends what their comfort level is. If you are comfortable going out to a community program, then there's usually some type of class that you can do to get started with that. Or if you have the means to go with a personal trainer, that's always great because it can be tailored to you. But if not, there's tons of online exercise videos. Like if you go onto YouTube and you can start with resistance bands because those are an easy way to do it, or even just start with body weight. I would say if you feel comfortable in your home and you're looking for like a low barrier entryway into it, put on a YouTube class, search for either body weight or resistance bands. There's a ton now tailored to for older individuals, and it can start with like a chair one, and then you can progress out of the chair as long as you're kind of increasing that difficulty over time, and that can be starting with like doing a couple extra reps when it starts to feel easier. But I do really like the resistance bands. And if I had to, I would recommend the ones with handles, not the TheraBands, because I think the ones with handles let you do a little bit more. Like we were doing, you can do like squats with them. You can do your like leg extension. You can do a hamstring curl with it. We were doing biceps, triceps, an overhead press, chest press, row. So you can kind of target all the major muscle groups. So I would say focus on the lower body, of course, because that keeps you walking up the stairs, getting up from chairs, all that stuff. And then also some focusing on your upper body, so doing some chest and back and biceps and triceps, so that way you can, carry your groceries. And like we like to think about a lot of the movements that we were doing for function as well. We did a little bit less on maybe, as you would call them, like the accessory muscles, and mostly focused on the major muscle groups. And that was intentional because it's in line with the physical activity guidelines as well. They recommend 2 days a week and using all the muscle groups. So we started with that. That's what the program, those are the programs that we did. And we saw improvements in function, which was important. And folks, we had that anecdotal evidence too, where they were saying after just using resistance bands, they felt stronger, and like they were able to change their car tires from like summer tires to winter tires, and like small things like that that are important to people and meaningful changes they were noticing. So for us, like we're interested in, did your muscles get bigger? Did you get stronger? But for them, it's the day-to-day things that they're noticing that are a little bit easier for them to do independently, where they thought, when as you get older, you think that's going to regress, but they were able to see improvements for the better. So I think my recommendation would be 2 days a week, just have that YouTube video maybe that you like. You can start with body weight first if, the bands feel too intimidating, and then slowly work up to some resistance bands and build that confidence.
Yeah, I think those are all great recommendations. And like you said, there's so many resources available now for free on the internet. YouTube is a gold mine of different information. Obviously, there's a lot of junk out there too, but, just searching
Yeah.
through old people, or older individuals, body weight, home routine, I'm sure you find thousands of videos aimed at that specific demographic. And obviously, the ones that are better typically, not always, but typically rise to the top. So you can see, oh, this one has 1 million views. That's probably better than the one with
Yeah.
20. Maybe not, but probably start there.
Yeah.
And then I think obviously online resources, Reform Fitness. There's a few other companies that are doing similar things to what we're doing. Burns Gym is doing something
Yeah.
similar, but they work more with community homes. So finding a starting point. I think resistance bands, like you said, are great, but something that you can do consistently and you feel comfortable doing is obviously the best place to start. And then I love those stories too. Like, we it's great when I get somebody that does health coaching and they lose 10% body fat, right? But what's cooler to me is like I
Yeah.
have a client in Nevada and she's 76. And we were doing a workout the other day and she's stepping all the way up onto like probably a 2 foot high bench, just doing like single leg step ups onto there, one
Oh,
leg at a time. And
that's
she was like
great.
blown away that
Yeah.
she could do it. And then she shared an anecdote with me that she had just seen her grandkids a few weeks prior, and she was running up the stairs after them. She was like, I never thought I'd be able to run up the
Yeah.
stairs again. It's like, that's awesome. Like, you can't really measure that on a body composition scale, but that
No.
kind of stuff is the stuff that makes it like, oh, this is actually helping people. It's worthwhile. So I just kind of want to wrap up here, Julia. This has been so great chatting with you, but just a few things of note. Obviously, sarcopenia, the disease of age-related muscle decline, picks up after the age of about 35 or 40, and it's rapid after that, especially in our sedentary population these
Yeah.
days. So it's going to be a giant problem. It is a giant problem now. It's going to be an even bigger giant problem as people continue to do less unless people start actually getting active and taking care of themselves, and it leads to so many poor health outcomes, less resilience, and then possibly social isolation as you get older because you lose your independence. The earlier you go into a nursing home, the poorer your health is typically, unless you're in like a really active community. I mean, I've unfortunately seen that. My mother had dementia, and we put her into a home at like 62 or 63, and she was
Oh, wow.
down bad in like 2 years because it's and she eventually passed away. But it's those places where they're just kind of locked up. It's like you're not really getting community. And
Yeah.
as important as exercise is, like community and the ability to actually interact with your family and loved ones is so much more important. That's something I don't think people really think about when it comes to exercise, but the two are definitely
Yeah.
correlated. So obviously resistance training started at any age is a powerful stimulus to mitigate and reverse sarcopenia. You can do it in person, you can do it virtually. Obviously, the research you're doing to kind of show that and help people realize that there's so many different ways to get this is awesome. And I think the biggest thing for most people is that it doesn't have to be complicated to start, right? A few simple exercise, progressively overloaded over time, a couple times a week, 2, 3 times a week to start is enough to really start seeing powerful improvements. The key is just, as the saying goes, the best time to start was yesterday, the second best time is today, right? So the sooner you can start doing this, the
Yeah.
sooner you get to start feeling those benefits. Any other key takeaways, or if you want to tell us a little bit more about that new paper for your doctoral research that's coming out soon, anything else you want to share before I let you go?
No, I think that was a really great summary of all the things that we talk about and that we do. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head of the social connectivity side of it. It's something as exercise scientists we don't consider often as an important way to adhere to the program, and also an important factor in just aging and having that community and what that means, and also how that draws people in and doesn't. So I think that's really important. If you're thinking outside of like more that application of how do we get people to exercise, how do we engage with them, it's considering those social factors as well, and not only like am I building the best training program for them, it's like do we have these other factors that are very important to their health and well-being.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. If anybody's interested in contacting you, or maybe they want to ask you some questions, what's the best way to learn more about you, contact you directly, share any contact information or Instagram, anything like that you've got as well?
Yeah, I think I can be contacted through email at julia.coletta@ubc.ca, and LinkedIn. It's also Giulia Coletta. I think those are probably the two best ways to reach me right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Julia. I look forward to hearing about that study once it finally gets published. Do you have a timeline, like a general idea of when it's going to come out?
Um, no, not yet. We got all the data back, and
Oh, gotcha. So you haven't
it's
even
being like
submitted
we're
yet or
running the result.
anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So
No,
you
no,
got
no.
a ways
But
ahead.
hopefully in the next
Year or
yeah,
two.
go. Unfortunately, a little bit more time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You
Well,
know how
thank you.
academia works.
Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will be back in a couple weeks, and we look forward to another episode with you. Thanks so much, Julia. Have a great day.
Thanks so much. You too.